Eyre, Chapter 28, Part 2. Whitcross regained, I followed a road which led from the sun, now fervent and high. By no other circumstance had I will to decide my choice. I walked a long time, and when I thought I had nearly done enough and might conscientiously yield to the fatigue that almost overpowered me, might relax this forced action, and sitting down on a stone I saw near, submit restlessly to the apathy that clogged heart and limb, I heard a bell chime, a church bell. I turned in the direction of the sound, and there, amongst the romantic hills, whose changes in aspect I had ceased to note an hour ago, I saw a hamlet and a spire. All the valley at my right hand was full of pasture fields and cornfields and wood, and a glittering stream ran zigzag through the varied shades of green, the mellowing grain, the sombre woodland, the clear and sunny lea. Recalled the rumbling of wheels to the road before me, I saw a heavily laden wagon laboring up the hill, and not far beyond were 2 cows and their drover. Human life and human labor were near. I must struggle on, strive to live, and bend to toil like the rest. About 2 o'clock p.m. I entered the village. At the bottom of its one street there was a little shop with some cakes of bread in the window. I coveted a cake of bread. With that refreshment I could perhaps regain a degree of energy. Without it, it would be difficult to proceed. The wish to have some strength and some vigor returned to me as soon as I was amongst my fellow beings. I felt it would be degrading to faint with hunger on the causeway of a hamlet. Had I nothing about me I could offer in exchange for one of these rolls? I considered it. I had a small silk handkerchief tied round my throat. I had my gloves. I could hardly tell how men and women in extremities of destitution proceeded. I did not know whether either of these articles would be accepted. Probably they would not, but I must try. I entered the shop. A woman was there. Seeing a respectably dressed person, a lady as she supposed, she came forward with civility. How could she serve me? I was seized with shame. My tongue would not utter the request I had prepared. I dared not offer her the half-worn gloves, the creased handkerchiefs. Besides, I felt it would be absurd. I only begged permission to sit down a moment, as I was tired. Disappointed in the expectation of a customer, she coolly acceded to my request. She pointed to a seat. I sank into it. I felt sorely urged to weep, but conscious how unreasonable such a manifestation would be, I restrained. Soon I asked her if there were any dressmakers or plain work women in the village. Yes, 2 or 3, quite as many as there are employment for. I reflected. I was driven to the point now. I was brought face to face with necessity. I stood in the position of one without a resource, without a friend, without a coin. I must do something. What? I must apply somewhere. Where? Did she know of any place in the neighborhood where a servant was wanted? Nay, she couldn't say. What was the chief trade in this place? What did most of the people do? Some were farm laborers. A good deal worked at Mr. Oliver's needle factory and at the foundry. Did Mr. Oliver employ women? Nay, it was men's work. And what do the women do? Naught, was the answer. Some does one thing and some another. Poor folk mun get on as they can. She seemed to be tired of my questions, and indeed what claim had I to importune her? A neighbor or 2 came in, my chair was evidently wanted, and I took leave. I passed up the street, looking as I went at all the houses to the right hand and to the left, but I could discover no pretext, nor see an inducement to enter any. I rambled round the hamlet, going sometimes to a little distance and returning again for an hour or more. Much exhausted and suffering greatly now for want of food, I turned aside into a lane and sat down under the hedge. Ere many minutes had lapsed, I was again on my feet, however, again in searching something, a resource, or at least an informant. A pretty little house stood at the top of the lane, with a garden before it, exquisitely neat and brilliantly blooming. I stopped at it. What business had I to approach the white door or touch the glittering knocker? In what way could it possibly be the interest of the inhabitants of that dwelling to serve me? Yet I drew near and knocked. A mid-looking, clean-attired young woman opened the door. In such a voice as might be expected from a hopeless heart and fainting frame, a voice wretchedly low and faltering, I asked if a servant was wanted here. No, said she. We do not keep a servant. Can you tell me where I could get an employment of any kind? Continued. I am a stranger without acquaintance in this place. I want some work, no matter what. But it was not her business to think for me, or to seek a place for me. Besides, in her eyes, how doubtful must have appeared my character, position, tale. She shook her head. She was sorry she could give no information, and the white door closed, quite gently and civilly, but it shut me out. If she had held it open a little longer, I believe I should have begged a piece of bread, for I was now brought low. I could not bear to return to the sordid village where, besides no prospect of aid was visible, I should have longed rather to deviate to a wood I saw not far off, which appeared in its thick shade to offer inviting shelter. But I was so sick, so weak, so gnawed with nature's cravings, instinct kept me from roaming round abodes where there was a chance of food. Solitude would be no solitude, rest no rest, while the vulture, hunger, thus sank its beak and talons in my side. I drew near houses, I left them, I came back again and again, I wandered away, always repelled by the consciousness of having no claim to ask, no right to expect interest in my isolated lot. Meantime, the afternoon advanced while I thus wandered about like a lost and starving dog, and crossing a field, I saw the church spire. I hastened towards it, near the churchyard, and in the middle of a garden stood a well-built though small house, which I had no doubt was the parsonage. I remembered that strangers who arrived at a place where they have no friends, and who want employment, sometimes apply to the clergyman for introduction and aid. It is the clergyman's function to help, at least with advice, those who wish to help themselves. I seemed to have something like a right to seek counsel here. Renewing then my courage, and gathering my feeble remains of strength, I pushed on. I reached the house and knocked at the kitchen door. An old woman opened. I asked, was this the parsonage? Yes. Was the clergyman in? No. Would he be in soon? No, he was gone from home. To a distance? Not so far, happened 3 mile. He had been called away by the sudden death of his father. He was at Marsh End now, and would very likely stay there a fortnight longer. Was there any lady of the house? Nay, there was naught but her, and she was housekeeper. And of her, reader, I could not bear to ask the relief for which I wanted and was sinking. I could not beg, and yet again I crawled away. One more I took off my handkerchief. Once more I thought of the cakes of bread in the little shop. Oh, for but a crust! For but one mouthful to allay the pang of famine. Instinctively I turned my face again to the village. I found the shop again, and I went in. And though others were there besides the woman, I ventured the request. Would she give me a roll for this handkerchief? She looked with evident suspicion. Nay, she never sold stuff in that way. Almost desperate, I asked for half a cake. She again refused. How could she tell where I had gotten the handkerchief? She asked. Will she take my gloves? No! What could she do with them? Reader, it is not pleasant to dwell on these details. Some say there is enjoyment in looking back to painful experiences past, but at this day I can scarcely bear to review the times to which I allude. The moral degradation blent with the physical suffering formed too distressing a recollection ever to be willingly dwelt on. I blamed none of those repulsed me. I felt it was but to be expected, and what could not be helped. No ordinary beggar is frequently an object of suspicion. A well-dressed beggar, inevitably so. To be sure, what I begged was employment, but whose business was it to provide me with employment? Not, certainly, that of persons who saw me then for the first time, and who knew nothing about my character. And as to the woman who would not take my handkerchief in exchange for my bread, why, she was right. If the offer appeared to her sinister, or the exchange unprofitable, let me condense now. I am sick of the subject. A little before dark I passed a farmhouse at the open door of which the farmer was sitting, eating his supper of bread and cheese. I stopped and said, Will you give me a piece of bread, for I am hungry? He cast on me a glance of surprise, but without answering he cut a thick slice from his loaf and gave it to me. I imagined he did not think I was a beggar, but only an eccentric sort of lady who had taken a fancy to his brown loaf. As soon as I was out of sight of his house, I sat down and ate it. I could not hope to get a lodging under a roof, and sought it in the wood I have before alluded to. But my night was wretched and my rest broken. The ground was damp, the air cold. Besides, intruders passed near me more than once, and I had again and again to change my quarters. No sense of safety or tranquillity befriended me. Towards morning it rained. The whole of the following day was wet. Do not ask me, reader, to give a minute account of the days. As before I sought work. As before I was repulsed. As before I starved. But once did food pass my lips. At the door of a cottage I saw a little girl about to throw a mess of cold porridge into a pig trough. Will you give me that? I asked. She stared at me. Mother, she exclaimed, there is a woman wants me to give her this porridge. Well, lass, replied a voice from within, give it her if she's a beggar. The pig doesn't want it. The girl emptied the stiffened mold into my hand, and I devoured it ravenously. As the wet twilight deepened, I stopped in a solitary bridle path, which I had been pursuing an hour or more. My strength is quite failing me, I said in soliloquy. I feel I can go no further. Shall I be an outcast again this night? While the rain descends, so must I lay my head on the cold, drenched ground. I fear I cannot do otherwise, for who will receive me? But it will be very dreadful with this feeling of hunger, faintness, chill, and this sense of desolation, this total prostration of hope. In all likelihood, though, I should die before morning. And why can I not reconcile myself to the prospect of death? Why do I struggle to retain a valueless life? Because I know or believe Mr. Rochester is still living? And then to die of want and cold is a fate to which nature cannot submit passively? Oh, Providence, sustain me a little longer. Aid, direct me. My glazed eyes wandered over the dim and misty landscape. I saw I had strayed far from the village. It was quite out of sight. The very cultivation surrounding it had disappeared. I had, by crossways and bypaths, once more drawn near the tract of moorland, and now only a few fields, almost as wild and unproductive as the heath from which they were scarcely reclaimed, lay between me and the dusky hill. Would I rather die yonder than in a street or in a frequented road? I reflected. And far better that crows and ravens, if any ravens there be in these regions, should pick my flesh from my bones, than that they should be prisoned in a workhouse coffin and moulder in a pauper's grave. To the hill then I returned. I reached it. It remained now only to find a hollow where I could lie down and feel at least hidden, not secure. But all the surface of the waste looked level. It showed no variation but of tint. Green where rush and moss overgrew the marshes, black where the dry soil bore only heath. Dark as it was getting, I could still see these changes, though but as mere alterations of light and shade, for color had faded with the daylight.